we are living in the moment now. We do have to focus on what we have and what Milwaukee has on Friday night. X, we'll start with you, a little preview towards this game. Going to be interesting also to see what the rotations. You've been big on Joe's rotations this episode. Going to be interesting to see how Joe handles the rotations against the Milwaukee Bucks on Friday night.
Yeah, I assume he gives the best guys the run on Friday. I think we've seen that throughout most of the season. In the bigger games, the best guys tend to get the most run. Don't expect a ton of Neemias Queta unless the matchups call for it. And one of those things that I'm looking forward to is who's the other guy for Milwaukee, because they tend to lose constantly, regardless if Giannis and Dame have big games. They usually need a third guy to step up. And they don't always need that against these teams like Washington and Detroit and let me see, Miami during this win streak. I was just going through the recent win streak. But against Boston, they are going to need at least another guy or two to figure it out. And I think that's the key for Boston. Can you just limit Giannis and Dame enough that another guy is going to have to beat you? And I think they're going to do fine with that. Milwaukee's a fraudulent team to me. They're not as bad as their early season record showed. They're not as good as their recent run showed either.
That's literally they're right where their record is now. It's like it's like it evens out a little bit.
I wouldn't say they're fraudulent in terms of I think their window has closed. I think that's how I look. I'm not saying you're wrong, X. I'm just saying how I view it. I think their window's closed. And I mentioned to you earlier, it's like, man, I hope the Celtics don't do what like teams like the Lakers and in Brooklyn and Milwaukee do, where it's like they don't accept the rebuild and they just go sign a bunch of has-beens and older players. And instead of rebuilding and getting younger, they're rebuilding and getting older, and the rebuilding is not rebuilding in the right direction. Like, I hope the Celtics don't go out and sign a 40-year-old DeAndre Jordan and Reggie Jackson, and that just isn't going to do anything for them, But I just wanted to I just feel like their window closed necessarily. X.
Well, it's all the part of the problem with these contending teams falling out of contention is they often make a move in which adds a salary onto their books that is just not sustainable in filling out the rest of the roster. You go down the list. The Lakers, they make a move where they're trading KCP and Montrezl Harrell for Russell Westbrook. They're trading all their depth, Kyle Kuzma as well. They're trading all of their depth for Russell Westbrook, who's making over $40 million, and we all know his value wasn't at that point at that point in time. And then you look at the Milwaukee Bucks. Who do they go and trade for? They trade all their depth away for Damian Lillard, over 30 point guard, making $40 million. They can't fill out the rest of the roster, and it's just like, oh, they don't really have any depth. Same thing happened with the Lakers back in 21 and 22. And then you look at the Denver Nuggets right now. I'll throw them out there. It's not necessarily an over 30 point guard that they're paying $40 million to. It's Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter Jr., they decided, oh, yeah, sure, we'll give you the rookie max. And then afterwards, they don't pay KCP, and they're left with this roster of, okay, you're paying Michael Porter Jr. as a near max guy in the NBA when Michael Porter Jr. just isn't that type of guy. He's just a glorified role player, borderline starter, really. And yeah, sure, he's a okay starter, but on the Celtics, would he start on the Celtics? Likely not. And he's making $40 million for the Denver Nuggets. So it's always these teams who just make that essentially $40+ million deal, whether it's trading away all their depth, or signing a player who simply doesn't deserve that money. And it just affects their ability to round out the rest of the rotation. That is going to be a question with the Celtics coming up in the next couple of years, because they're paying a ton of money to Brown, Tatum. They gave Holiday the extension. They gave Derek White the extension. They gave Kristaps Porzingis his money. And with all those guys making a pretty big bill, we are already starting to see it off the bench this season. Now, we've had sort of the same bench as we did last year, really minus O'Shea Brissett. But when Peyton Pritchard is up, when Sam Hauser's up, really the thing we're lucky about right now is Peyton Pritchard. His contract is just, it's becoming one of the most valuable contracts in all of the NBA. He's making, $6 million this year for the sixth man of the year. I mean, that is a huge boost. But That's also part of why we weren't able to fit Lonnie Walker onto the books. We couldn't find a trade for Jaden Springer at the beginning of the season. I wholeheartedly believe Brad Stevens was calling pretty much every team in the league trying to ship Jaden Springer's $4 million off the books, because we all know he's the eighth highest paid Celtic. He's not the eighth best Celtic. I mean, he can't even get into the rotation, can't get more than 2 minutes the other night when half the main Celtics are seemingly out on the court, and even in Cleveland too. Can't get into the game at all. He's the eighth highest paid player on the Celtics. I hate to trash on Jaden Springer here because a lot of people have some optimism for him. And Xavier said it earlier. He can be a menace on defense, but the offensive game just isn't there whatsoever. And clearly there's something behind the scenes that Joe Mazzulla and the coaching staff doesn't trust. But we keep him after we can't find a trade partner for him and cut Lonnie Walker. And that was what was driving me nuts about Lonnie Walker is we could have got him on a legitimately bargain deal because of his talent last year we saw in Brooklyn. And of course, he's one of those players that kind of got cut out with the new CBA. All these teams essentially, we're going to keep our 15th roster spot open. We're not going to add extra money because it's going to send us over X apron. And the luxury tax is even harder on us this year. He gets cut out of the league essentially, but we could have had a bargain deal on that player, on Lonnie Walker. Doesn't happen. We end up keeping Springer. And it's like, yeah, the Celtics bench depth, it's going to be a question in the years to come with all the players at the top making the money in which they do. I think eventually we're going to see somebody. I hate to say this in a random Wednesday post game after we beat the Detroit Pistons and we're all happy here, but there's somebody out of the top five. I know we call it a top six with Al Horford, but cut him out of the equation real quick. The top five: Porzingis, White, Holiday, Brown, Tatum. There's going to be somebody out of that group. Most likely not Tatum. Probably not Brown. Probably not going to be here in a couple of
Not
years
White
because of the bill we're paying. And that is when we get into that territory of the Bucks, the Lakers, and of course the Nuggets, where, yeah, they're contending teams who have all won championships, but to really keep that core together, it's a question. But I know we're talking about the Milwaukee Bucks right now. They're really in that situation already. It seems like Damian Lillard and Giannis, they can go off any single night, but I totally agree with Xavier again, where they need that third player. And most often this year, it's been Brook Lopez. And we've been talking about the big man rotation a lot in this post-game show. So to see what they actually throw at Brook Lopez, because Brook Lopez, he's on kind of the back end of his career, you'd say. But he does have some nights where, oh my goodness, he's blocking every single shot out there. Oh my goodness, he's hitting these 30-foot threes. And Brook Lopez, he can be a pretty all right paint scorer as well. So how the Celtics deal with that on whichever night, Friday night, I would say, right? Friday,
yeah.
Friday night will certainly be interesting to see because the rest of the Bucks rotation, it's a lot of minimum or unproven guys that just don't really scare me as a Celtics fan, Celtics analyst at all. The Celtics, they definitely have the upper hand in the Bucks series now, but the top three guys on the Bucks roster, Giannis, Lillard, and even Brook Lopez, they can really hurt you if you're not really matched up with them well.
Seamus, you just screwed us. You just said you're not afraid of any Bucks role player. That means AJ Green's going to come in and drop 30.
Give me a break. No,
if that guy keeps calling himself Derry Bird, I want him out of the NBA. I'm not kidding. That is the most disrespectful,
Andre
funny
Jackson
nickname I've ever seen.
Pat Connaughton.
I
already had his
Jackson
moment against us. 2019 at the Garden, Game 3. Pat Connaughton, the image is still there in my head where we're just the 2018-19 Celtics are falling apart in front of our eyes, and who's at the precipice of it? Oh, Pat Connaughton, local hometown kid from the England area. No, the Bucks. I don't want to make a guarantee on here, Justin, but Friday night. We bring another level to the Milwaukee Bucks. They've given us some trouble this year twice, okay? But guess what happened in the late portions of those games? Celtics won. Celtics won.
I think,
but Celtics won. Just saying.
I think it's gonna be interesting. I'd be pretty amped if the Celtics go up 3-0.
We're done being scared of the Milwaukee Bucks.
I don't think it's necessarily being scared against the Milwaukee Bucks. I just think they've always presented a tougher matchup to us. I think I've never been, and this isn't me being cocky, this isn't me being a homer. Like the Milwaukee Bucks have never scared me. Like I've never sat here and been like, ooh, like I'm petrified of playing them. You know what I'm petrified of? Teams like the Orlando Magic, teams like the Indiana Pacers. Those are the teams I go in and I'm like, ugh, like, can we just not play this game today? Those are the teams that I am scared that Justin Lowe.
No, we're right now. We are the chase. Now, this is what I want to make clear here. In recent years, we were petrified of teams. It's okay to admit that.
I'm not.
We are when we're chasing other teams. Like, this team's coming to the Garden. We are that team now. That other teams, fan bases they face and go.
I'm not saying that.
Boston tonight. Boston.
Let's compare. Right now. If Milwaukee's on your schedule for a first round or Indiana, who are you scared of? Who are you more scared
Milwaukee.
of? Really?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm more Giannis
That's
versus.
what I'm scared of more than anything.
That was a terrible example. That was Indiana terrible. Tyrese Halliburton's having a terrible year. Orlando.
Still, I still feel like Milwaukee and
Franz and Paolo don't know how to play with each other. They've never shown it. Ever.
But the only thing about Orlando,
I think they present the tougher matchup, man. I don't know.
They might in the long run for sure, but we need to see it.
It's something about these tough, young, gritty teams. Nothing to lose, everything to gain. That's the type of teams that frighten me the most.
I'll say this:
regular season playoffs. Those are the teams. Indiana last year, we swept them. They were the toughest matchup we had. Injuries aside, they were the toughest matchup we had.
If Paolo comes back and Franz is still the same offensive hub and those two guys figure out how to play off of each other, I think they're probably the scariest matchup for Boston. But it's never really been a sustainable combination with those two for a prolonged period of time. It just hasn't. Right.
And so Paolo comes out playing like an MVP this year. Franz, who played like an MVP type of player last year, or maybe not MVP, you guys know what I'm talking about, all-star player last year, comes in struggling. I mean, this guy couldn't hit water on a boat on a rainy day to start the season. This guy, he was struggling. Now, Paolo goes out this past month. Franz, he's
an all-NBA player right now.
Right. So I do agree with you. We do need to see the consistency, but the topic of this conversation is on the Milwaukee Bucks, who we will be seeing on Friday night. Go ahead, Seamus. Go ahead.
Let me add another one to this. Between Orlando, Indiana, Milwaukee. Best player in the series versus Orlando, Jason Tatum. Best player in the series versus Indiana, Jason Tatum. Best player in the series versus Milwaukee, probably Giannis.
Yeah.
That's what's scary about Milwaukee. I don't really fear Milwaukee over those other teams. I think we can beat all of those teams, really. I think Orlando is the wild card because their potential ceiling is much higher, for sure. But in terms of best player in the series and who you're going to have to deal with, like Giannis, still MVP caliber player, still one of the best players in the entire NBA, at least top 3. So in that regard, yes, the Milwaukee Bucks still to be, we're not scared of them, but still got to watch out, of course.
Celtics. Well, you got to keep an eye on them because they are rising up in the standings, but at the same time, right now, they're fighting. They're kind of in that playing area. That's not a. That's I
might be a first round matchup. 2-7.
I wouldn't. Yeah, man.
1-8.
I don't know if I'd like to see Giannis in the first round necessarily for sure, but the Celtics have a regular season game against Giannis on Friday night. It's always fun when you get to see the Celtics and Bucks square away on ESPN. Tatum and Giannis going at it, 2 MVP caliber players so far this season. Hopefully JT is rested up and ready to go, as well as Drew Holiday.